the white good. It's just a white good. It's a thing you buy, does a job, you don't really talk about it, you don't cherish it, and ultimately you chuck it away. Not that long ago, the Hyundai car brand was a white good, really. Bought by people because it was good value, it was reliable, it ticked a box, it allowed you to be transported from A to B, until quite recently. And then a car called the IONIQ 5 came along and really blew away so many preconceptions that Hyundai was building up to all this time. A car that's almost created fanaticism. A car that I reviewed on this show, and it's one of my best viewed videos. Today, we're going to look at the next car in the IONIQ family. I'm Jonny Smith, welcome to the Late Break Show. Let's go and have a look at the IONIQ 6. That might have looked a bit strange, I promise there was no one behind there. This is it. This is the IONIQ 6. And in fact, if you remember back to 2020, amongst all the weirdness that happened, there was a concept car that came out called the Prophecy. And that's what this car is the real version of. And Hyundai has a habit of making concept cars become reality. And this is, I think, no real exception because it's quite out there in a good way. And there's some parts of it which are shared with the IONIQ 5, but not a great deal. It's not a Audi Russian doll bigger version of the other car. And that's the difference with what Hyundai's up to. In fact, this projection on the back of the wall there with the chest pieces, it's an interesting analogy. I don't normally go down the sort of PR faff chat, but what Hyundai's saying is the cars don't have to all look the same. They're all part of a family, part of a team, but they don't all have to share the same design. And if you look at the IONIQ 7 that's coming, which is going to be a large SUV, again, doesn't look anything like this, doesn't really look anything like the IONIQ 5. This car interests me. This car is really quite wild in many, many elements. So what is it? It's based on the, and I have a quick look at the literature, but it's based on the same E-GMP dedicated electric floor pan, because remember the IONIQ sort of subfamily name is all about electric cars. There's going to be no piston derivative of this. And to that end, we don't exactly know the range or the batteries, the motors of this particular car. All we know is that presumably you're going to have quite a long range option and probably quite a high performance option, because this is a kind of a low slung, almost kind of, well, I'll show you when we get to the back, but almost a kind of sports saloon look, but with a kind of lounge element inside. Let's jump to the front then. Okay, so it's called the IONIQ 6, and I've been pointed out various parts of it which have 6 of these squares in it. There's lots of the pixel design which is carried over from the IONIQ 5. But this car really focuses not on sort of slab-sided Giugiaro, DeLorean-esque kind of lines. This is all about curvature and streamlining. Because what Hyundai's main inspiration for this car was the sort of the idea of the 1920s, 1930s Art Deco streamliner idea, where people were just starting to get the idea of aerodynamics, that sort of teardrop shape. So as a consequence, this is like 0.21 coefficient, which is incredible, really. Anyway, these 6 squares here are repeated in various parts of the car, and of course it's the IONIQ 6 squares. And this particular version here, this one here, this indicates the charging status, which is really cool. The IONIQ 6 does have a frunk, apparently, but we're not allowed to see it on this particular one. And you'll probably know I don't do a great deal of static walk rounds of cars on the Late Break Show, but if they're interesting enough, I feel like I've got to. And we're here in actually a part of London that 15, 20 years ago was pretty down and out and not particularly nice, not really talked about in a positive light. But now, of course, it's funky and it's gritty and it's arty and it's interesting. There's a reason why they chose this. Some parts of the IONIQ 6 that I'm noticing as well. Of course, you've got these mad mirror cameras, which because there's screens inside the car. But the most interesting part to me is the fact that it's sort of smoked transparent plastic to show all the innards, to show the workings. And you can't quite see it on camera, but it's the same with that sort of shark aerial on the back. That is actually translucent plastic showing the electric innards inside. One thing I would say is that if you look at the other Hyundais on sale right now, the Tucson, for example, with that crazy front end, with the grille, with all those multiple lights in it, it's so distinctive on the road. I mean, the back end of that car almost looks better than the Mustang Mach-E. And then you've got something called the Staria, which is this mad spaceship-like MPV, which sadly we're not getting in the UK, I don't think. Although I would like to very much, that would be marvellous. Look at that. On the door handle here, flush of course, because this seems to be the fashion for a lot of EVs, because you want everything to be as streamlined and efficient as possible. Again, 6 squares, just like the ones on the front there. These wheels, I think they're probably 20s. Yes, they're 20s here. Not actually as aero as a lot of the EVs are. I would have thought they'd be a bit more aero and maybe disc-like, but alas, not. What's interesting here, I've noticed here, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but the arch goes around in a conventional way, but there's an additional piece of cladding just here. Apparently that and some of this here, which is where air gets forced in or around the car. That has added 0.1 to the coefficiency of this car. So little details like this. It's not just about substance, it's style as well. Looking at the Ioniq 6 from that sort of an angle, I think you're starting to appreciate quite how crazy some of these lines are, quite how unique it is. And this kind of bowed waistline and this roofline reminds me of several cars that have come before. One of them is the first gen Merc CLS, which I thought was a fantastic looking car, the coupe saloon. Ironically, it seems that people like Mercedes and people like Porsche, I'll talk a bit more about Porsche at the back there, it's almost like those are the companies who should be making cars like this, but are actually a bit more traditional. This thing's not traditional whatsoever. There's a number of what Hyundai is saying is kind of very, very eco. You know, there's a lot of eco stuff on this car, the same as there was on the Ioniq 5, with recycled fibres being used inside and water-based paint and biodegradable recycled plastics. A lot of that's inside, but some of it is also on the outside here. Wheelbase. Remember, Ioniq 5, phenomenally long wheelbase, like 3 metre wheelbase. This is 2,950 mil in wheelbase. It's a slightly shorter wheelbase than the 5, but an overall slightly longer car. And it's a very, very different car, of course, because this is so curvaceous and sleek, sort of the streamliner idea rather than the sort of Lancia Integrale idea. Before we have a look inside, I want to show you the back, because I think the back is probably aesthetically the maddest bit. I really quite like it. So come around here. But from that angle, you can see what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a little bit of a bit of a ribbed whale tail almost. And that wraparound light, there's a little bit of Porsche going on here. And these pixels continue. Look at this. There's nothing white good about the back of the Hyundai IONIQ 6. Wow. I mean, look at this thing. You've got the pixels continuing, but it's a ducktail spoiler. It's obviously helping with its efficiency, but it's ribbed on the top. It really does look quite 911-ish. I forgot to say when we were at the front end, there's a new, subtly revised Hyundai logo. It's more recessed, I guess, for aero efficiency, and it's satin finish as well. So it's not like Kia, who have completely changed their logo. This is still undoubtedly Hyundai. And then you've got another spoiler down here, like a ducktail. So it's almost got like 80s 911, 70s 911. And then down here, what, 993? Bit of Carrera GT, but this is the bit that I love. I don't know if you can see them now, but here, these 2 chrome strips and the pixels down here and here, they look like bumper overriders from older cars, you know, where they used to have, and the old 911s have got the lovely chrome overriders. I really think it sort of harks of that in a good way. I mean this in a good way. If Hyundai's designers are shaking their fists at the screen, I'm sorry, but you know. Now, I can't open the boot on this particular car to show you. I have actually looked, but I'm not allowed to film it. Think of it as, because it hinges here, so think of it as a saloon, and it's like a Taycan, in so much as it's quite a shallow opening, but deep. So if that's your bag, then yeah, and you've obviously got some room at the front somewhere, but we don't know what size storage space that'll be. Oh, and on this side is the charging port here, on this back corner. I want to see it parked next to an Ioniq 5 so I can show you the difference in proportions, but we'll put the sizes of both the cars on screen now, because I can't remember them all. And so we enter the mindful cocoon, or so Hyundai are referring to it. The idea being that it's an area of sort of mindfulness and lounge-like spaciousness. This is a flat floor car, the Ioniq 6, like the Ioniq 5, but the difference is this does have a full centre console here. Loads and loads of interesting materials here, a lot of renewables, sustainable materials. And remember the Czech Republic factory that Hyundai has, that runs on purely renewable energy. So they are a company constantly trying to think of different materials, which I like, because often they're actually more interesting than your regular stuff anyway. Look, just in this door panel, there's an uplight. In this case, it's pink. Rippled, recycled, I think, plastic effect here. Down here, translucent plastic, rubberized finish, so you can see what's inside here. The same being in here in the door bins. You can see what's in there. That's really cool. This is a similar design, the sort of perforations that turn into pixels from the Ioniq 5. Love that design touch. That's really cool. And I was reading something about this. Yeah, the eco-friendly process of leather dyeing using flaxseed oil, reducing biochemical oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand, recycled pet fabric. This really coarse, interesting looking carpet made from fishing nets that have been pulled out of the sea and reprocessed, I guess. I love this sort of stuff. It's brilliant. And while I'm down here, of course, remember those cameras on the outside. They're on these upturned winglets on the edge of the dash, showing the cameras here. So whereas the Ioniq 5 is quite linear, quite boxy, this has the curves coming from the outside coming into here. And this huge infotainment plinth there, I think 2 12-inch displays. Yeah, 2 12-inch displays. Let's sit in. So the idea, of course, that we spend a long time in our car. We want to turn our cars sometimes into mobile offices with the world of connectivity that we've got now. And the Ioniq 5 had all kinds of features to turn yourself into a home office. This has this sort of high console here, lots of places to plug in and charge, 2-spoke steering wheel, which I do love, and these 4 squares which are on the Ioniq 5 as well. But on the 6 here, they actually show the charging status of the car. So if you peer in through the window when it's on charge, or it's someone else's car and you want to know whether it's nearly finished at a rapid charge public charge point, you can just see, easy, either there or on the front, where we showed before. This is familiar, these are familiar, same as the Ioniq 5. Oh, now this car is obviously, it's not a finished car, so the screens aren't exactly real, neither are these, but it does give you a really good impression of, visually what it's going to be like. It will look exactly the same as this, and I've got no reason to not believe that. Apparently I can open the glove box. So it's like a sort of work tray, I guess you can use, which is cool. That'll be wireless charging, an abundance of USBs, but I love these lower trays. They're increasingly my favourite thing. There's less rattle when their stuff's lower down. But yeah, this idea of mindful cocoon kind of environment. I'll take a look at the back, because I was worried that this low roof line would actually make it feel a little bit claustrophobic, and this particular version doesn't have a glass roof or anything. But actually there's loads of headroom, like a deceivingly large amount. Strange how they've got these proportions to work. Let's have a go in the back. Well, I'm going to sit behind myself like I always do. I love this design of seat. It's similar to the Kia EV6 and so forth. It reminds me of ET. If I'm sat in the back, I feel like I've got ET being my Uber and my passenger. But the good thing is it means it's sculpted out to give you actually extra legroom. There's loads of legroom in this, and that's that E-GMP, the E-GMP platform that these cars run on. Like I said before, what, 2,950mm wheelbase, big wheelbases on these cars now, which means it's good because it maximises the space that we occupy in here rather than just having a large car for the sake of a large car. I'm sure they're going to be, well, there's a couple of USBs there. I'm sure there's going to be a 3-pin plug, just like there is on the Ioniq 5. Map pockets, which actually you don't see so often on cars anymore because nobody has maps. I guess it's an iPad pocket. A little bit of stowage here. Again, sitting at the back right, I've got a good amount of room here. Got a really good amount of room, and of course it's a 5-seat, this particular version. Yeah, I don't know if there's a ski hatch or not. Look at this as well. This is unusual. I've just noticed on the door, get my knees out of the way. On the door, you've got the door handle up here with the heated seat button on the door, which is the same as some existing product. But here you've got the speaker and an extra little storage shelf just there for your phone or for loose change or confectionery, for example. I think what we're saying here is Hyundai doesn't have a rich legacy of combustion engines that are memorable. In fact, it doesn't have a rich legacy of memorable cars. When the whole ground-up EV thing was on the horizon, they jumped at it, both feet, hard, and they've made their EVs really recognisable, memorable, strong. And I love that about it. They are running away with it compared to so many of what they call the legacy manufacturers who have been around for decades and decades and decades. These guys are writing their own rule book. It's fantastic to see. And I know from experience the efficiency of the EV drivetrains in the Korean cars is chef's kiss. You can order these in 12 colours and they're going to be going on sale towards the back end of this year, we think. No idea of price yet. Who would have thought a decade or so ago that we would see the most radically designed cars coming from Korea, coming from what were seen as just value brands like Hyundai and Kia. Amazing, isn't it? And divisive. And I like it when stuff is divisive, but I like it when it's married with practicality. Fully efficient EV drivetrain, renewable, interesting materials. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching this episode of The Late Break Show. If you haven't subscribed already, what are you thinking? Subscribe. And if you want to become a Patreon, you can get access to videos like this a little bit earlier. And I'll write some blogs as well, which I don't write anywhere else. Anyway, I'm going to spend a bit of time looking at this on my own because this car goes off to Germany or somewhere in the next 3 hours, so I have a bit of quiet time. Cheers.